Honourable Member for Hastings, Lennox and Addington, Tiendenaga, that she may have a minute less than expected for her speech.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I'm happy to rise tonight to speak on C-228, legislation that would fundamentally reshape how Canada affirms its treaties. Now, I'll admit, this isn't quite the agreement I hoped to be speaking about after more than 5 months of trade negotiations with the U.S. Still, Bill C-228 raises issues that goes to the very heart of how Parliament exercises its constitutional role. The intent behind this private member's bill is commendable. It seeks to give Parliament a stronger voice in the treaty process, to make approval and adoption of agreements more transparent and accountable. Those are principles I support. But while the goal is worthy, I believe the way this bill goes about achieving it is flawed. At the risk of echoing some of the thoughtful concerns by my colleague from Wellington Halton Hills, I would like to briefly outline the key provisions of this legislation. As written, the legislation would do 3 things. First, it would formalize the practice of ministers tabling major treaties in this place prior to ratification, along with an explanatory note. Second, it would require a committee of the House to review any proposed treaty and report it back to the House. Third, it would require the minister to obtain the advice of the House before ratification. While I am all for giving this place a bigger voice in the machinations of government, I'm concerned about the second aspect of this bill, namely the requirement of a committee of the House to review and report back. My concerns, Madam Speaker, are threefold. Firstly, what is the purpose of sending proposed treaties to committee? Secondly, can the committees as they are currently constituted actually carry out the massive increase in workload C-228 would necessitate? And of perhaps the largest importance, I'm really concerned about a potential chilling effect it may have in a negotiating process. To be clear, this isn't a question of effort. The reality is that there just aren't simply enough hours in a day, a week, a month for parliamentarians to thoroughly scrutinize the dozens, if not hundreds, of additional documents that could be sent to the relevant House committees. To provide some context, Madam Speaker, since 2008, 467 treaties have been tabled in the House. By my napkin math, during that same period, 341 pieces of government legislation have passed committee and received royal assent. We already face severe limitations on our ability to analyze legislation and conduct studies at our committees. With the addition of proposed treaties being sent into the room, the very few hours we have will be reduced even further. This means less legislation passed, less treaties approved, less private members' legislation agreed to, and less studies in committee. For a microcosm, in the 41st Parliament, Prime Minister Stephen Harper and his strong, stable, national majority government tabled 142 treaties in this House. If this bill was a law, that means that Parliament would have had 142 additional study topics, 142 other very important committee meetings that were not occurring. And this is assuming the absolute best case scenario where each treaty is approved by all parties with little or no debate. Who knows how long a treaty may require at committee? This leads into my second concern with the proposal to send this to committee. The simple question is, why? Parliamentarians do not have the capacity to amend or change the wording of a proposed treaty. We are simply there to say yay or nay. We are not involved in the negotiation process. The government is. Ministers and skilled public servants, subject matter experts and diplomats hammering out minutia after minutia. So I'm curious as to what members would envision the committee process look like. Do we treat the treaty like legislation? Almost everyone in this place has done line-by-line consideration of legislation before. We know how tedious but necessary it is. Let's engage in a bit of a thought experiment. Tomorrow, this legislation achieves royal assent, and additionally, the government announces we have a renegotiated CUSMA. It's a trilateral trade deal with revisions and additions. CUSMA gets sent to International Trade Committee. The agreement is about as long as the previous, ringing in at just under 1,900 pages. But then what happens next? Do they do line-by-line consideration, clause by clause? How are the offices expected to do diligence in understanding each and every single clause in the little time that we have? Does the committee supply simply a yay or nay? Does this end the deal? How much time is given to the committee and its members to consider the document? Does a 10-page treaty get the same amount of time for MPs to familiarize themselves as a 2,000-page behemoth? Does rejecting the treaty mean trade talks collapse? Madam Speaker, this highlights an unfortunate reality that this legislation cannot meet. Either the process is fulsome and done with the attention to detail and due process that it deserves, in which case it quite possibly cripples the workload of the relevant committee, or it turns into a rubber stamping process, in which case it is irrelevant and not needed. This is, of course, ignoring the other elements in the room. It provides all parties with another legislative process that can be politically weaponized, further delaying the process. All of this leads into a third issue that, in my opinion, is by far the most serious. This may be the first time, Madam Speaker, that you will ever hear a Tory say in this House, but this legislation's most worrisome aspect is the potential effect this will have on limiting the authority for the current government to do its job. But this legislation will have a massive chilling effect on the government's ability to negotiate in good faith with other governments. Simply put, why would the nations of the world put any faith or effort in the treaty negotiation processes if the entire process can be derailed or held up in Parliament? This is particularly poignant given what is happening right now in Washington. To be clear, the Conservatives wish nothing but total success to the government in their negotiating efforts with the U.S. We all want as best for Canada and the U.S. We may disagree on how we're going to get there, but our goal is the same. And I would like to take this opportunity to place on parliamentary record my continued commitment that of my team and myself to extend our cooperation and support to the government negotiating team in any way we can. Through you, Madam Speaker, I reiterate to the Minister of Canada-U.S. Trade, the Minister of Finance, the Minister of Foreign Affairs, and the Prime Minister directly that my door remains open and my commitment to constructive cooperation and engagement with our U.S. neighbors is unwavering. However, let me be clear. Understand that the willingness to cooperate does not exempt the government from rightful scrutiny and criticism where it is warranted. It also means the government needs to signal its intent to actually engage with the opposition to get the best deal possible for Canada and end this unjust and unprovoked trade dispute. Bringing this back to C-228, the last thing I would like to do during any negotiating process is to signal any potential treaty partners that the government does not have the agency to negotiate on behalf of the government. Closing, Madam Speaker, Bill C-228 is guided by good intentions to strengthen Parliament's role in treaty approval. As drafted, it risks slowing decision-making and blurring the line between advisory oversight and executive responsibility. I would like to applaud the member from Jonquière for his vision and his efforts to empower this place, but unfortunately, I cannot support this implementation of that vision as is. Thank you, Madam Speaker.